Welcome to my channel. My name is Adina. I'm an intuitive astrologer. In this video, I will be going over the energy for the full moon lunar eclipse we are having March 25th, 2024. I will be getting into the chart for the lunar eclipse. Then I will be getting into the chart for Canada and how this lunar eclipse is showing up for Canadians. And then I will be getting into all 12 rising signs. So I will have timestamps listed below so that you can skip ahead to the section of the video you wish to watch. I do highly recommend watching the first portion of this video where I go into the chart for the lunar eclipse because it will bring more context to the energies, especially once we get into all 12 rising signs. Now, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you align with my energy and enjoy my content. Now, this lunar eclipse is taking place on March 25th, 2024 at 5 degrees of Libra in 7 minutes. So you can adjust for your location on the planet. That way you have an exact time for when this lunar eclipse will take place. Now, let's start by going over the nodes for a minute. So the nodes, the north node is this glyph here, which is in Aries, and the south node is this glyph here, which is in Libra. The nodes entered Aries and Libra July 2023. Now, I'm going to link a video up top here where I go into all of this energy and what this can represent and indicate. The north node represents something new, a new direction, a new journey. It's very unknown. The south node can represent something from the past or where we need to release and let go of something. And so where you have the nodes transiting your birth chart, this is going to show you areas of life going through massive karmic changes and where you're heading in a new direction and where you can possibly be releasing and letting something go. We do want to remember that this is an 18-month story playing out. It takes the nodes about 18 months to transit the sign. And so the nodes will be in Aries and Libra till January 2025. So there is a story playing out here. And every time we have an eclipse, there's more energy to that story. So we had our solar eclipse in Libra, October 14th of 2023. So think back to that time period. What were you moving through? What was showing up for you? Was there something you felt you needed to let go of? Was there something you felt was coming to an end? This can also, the South Node in Libra can also be bringing people or relationships back from the past. The South Node in Libra can also be showing you who is not meant to be in your life anymore, who you are no longer in alignment with. So think back to October 2023, what was showing up for you? What were you navigating? What were you moving through? There's going to be more to that story coming in now with this lunar eclipse. This is a full moon lunar eclipse. So this is a culmination point. This can be a completion or a better understanding to the story that is playing out. Now, Venus rules Libra. So Venus is the ruler of this full moon lunar eclipse. And Venus is in Pisces, where she is exalted. So this is a very romantic, compassionate, creative Venus. Venus loves being in Pisces. And we have Saturn here. So this is a few days after we have the Venus-Saturn conjunction. And actually, all of the planets are on one side of the zodiac right now. And everything kind of leads to Pisces. Even though it is a full moon lunar eclipse in Libra, there is a lot of Pisces energy. Pluto is ruled by Saturn and Aquarius, which leads to Pisces. Jupiter and Uranus are in Taurus, which is ruled by Venus, and Pisces. Aries, all this Aries energy is ruled by Mars, and we now have Mars in Pisces. So everything kind of leads and falls into Pisces. And Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac. And I really, really feel at this time, we are moving through this transformational and transition of releasing and ending karmic cycles and stepping into a new story. There's something completing, there's something ending here, and it very well can have to do with relationships because it is Libra, it's Venus. It very well can have to do with karmic cycles and patterns that have played out within relationships. It can have to do with karmic connections. It can have to do with your own karmic cycles that have played out that maybe have prevented you from forming really positive spiritual connections. connections. And I've been talking a lot about this Venus Saturn conjunction in Pisces being like creating a lot of romantic partnerships. I've just really been feeling that intuitively. Yes, I know Saturn can sometimes bring challenge and restriction, but I really feel like this Venus is just I don't know. There's something about this energy I've been feeling for about a week now of just committed partnerships forming, committed karmic relationships, and not the type of karmic relationships that come into your life that trigger healing or awakening. I feel like it's the karmic relationships where both people have done the work on themselves and then they come together and form a beautiful spiritual connection and union. I feel like that's the energy that we're in. Now, we also have a beautiful trine from Pluto. The moon is forming a trine to Pluto here, which is bringing in more, excuse me, more power for that transformational process. Pluto can also be very magnetic, which I also feel that Pluto is playing a part and almost drawing in these connections, like manifesting in your karmic partner in a sense. There's something very magnetic about this full moon lunar eclipse with Pluto. Now, we also have Venus, which is the ruler of this lunar eclipse, in a sextile to Jupiter. And Venus and Jupiter are actually in mutual reception. And that is when the both planets involved are in each other's sign. So Venus is in a Jupiter ruled sign and Jupiter is in a Venus ruled sign. And they're forming this sextile. So that energy becomes amplified. And not only that, but Jupiter is bringing in some really beautiful support and wisdom and a higher understanding for Venus, for this romantic, compassionate Venus that knows what she wants, needs, and desires, and that can all be changing. That can all be shifting. I also feel like, too, Jupiter is bringing in almost like this support to end the karmic cycles that have been playing out and bringing in that insight as to what those karmic patterns are and how to release and let go of them. Now, the interesting thing is that there is actually a yod here. There's this Venus Jupiter sextile, and then we have Venus and Jupiter forming an in conjunction to the south node. And what I get from that is that where this really can be a beautiful process and a beautiful transition and releasing all these karmic cycles that have been holding you back or playing out within relationships, possibly preventing you from forming really good connections. There's going to be some type of psychological hurdle that you're going to have to navigate. That's what I really feel like with this energy. But if we are working with the Venus Jupiter energy, sticking to what you need almost spiritually, because this is a Venus in Pisces, listening to your intuition, figuring out, what do you need on a soul level, your needs, your wants, your desires, how has that changed? If we kind of work with this sextile between Venus and Jupiter, we can move into this south node and release, because that is what that south node is. It's a releasing, a letting go. This energy can also be working with your self-love, your self-worth, your self-confidence. We even have this sextile between the sun and Pluto. And I actually look at this energy as almost like an ego death or something showing up, because the sun can represent our ego, our consciousness. Pluto is transforming that in some way. So there might be something showing up at this time as well, showing you where you can operate from your ego, maybe where you're not balancing things out, because Libra is all about balance and harmony. And so there can be a lot showing up now where you're starting to become aware, and those are part of your karmic cycles that have been playing out in relationships, possibly, is where you operate from that ego. And so Pluto is really transforming partnerships, but also the self as well. Now, at the same time, we also have Mercury in Aries, and Mercury is going to be in pre-shadow at this time because Mercury stations retrograde April 1st, and Mercury will be retrograde from April 1st to the 25th. So Mercury is in pre-shadow. Now, Mercury in Aries can be very impulsive. It wants to go, it wants to initiate. And so it's kind of at odds with a lot of this other energy. So you just want to be careful that you are taking things a little bit slower. And also, because Mercury is in pre-shadow, if you're starting anything right now, you're probably going to have to redo it or go back over it when Mercury is retrograde. Okay, so now let's get into the chart for Canada. Okay, so Canada's chart is the inner wheel, and then the transits are the outer wheel. So we have this lunar eclipse in Libra taking place in Canada's fourth house. Now, in a personal birth chart, when we're talking about an individual, the fourth house rules home, family, property, real estate. I do look to the fourth house when we're talking about a country. I do look to the fourth house for property and real estate, but I also look to the fourth house with what's going on behind the scenes, what's going on in private, because even in an individual's chart, the fourth house can be very private. The 10th house is the public image, what you do out in the world, what you're known for. The fourth house is what's going on behind the scenes at home. And so when we're talking about a country, this is the government. The 10th house is the government, authority, leadership. The fourth house is what is going on behind the scenes. And I'm going to link a few videos in the description below that I actually just watched, which was really fascinating because it kind of represented the energies that are showing up with this chart. But I think that this full moon lunar eclipse in Libra is really going to be highlighting a lot of what has been going on behind the scenes. And if we take a look here, we actually have this full moon lunar eclipse forming a T-square to Canada's natal moon, and even like Uranus and Sun. And so the moon is actually Canada's chart ruler because Canada is a Cancer rising. So the moon's actually very prominent for Canada, very important. But I really think, and actually in one of those videos, it'll kind of show how this is manifesting. But I think that we are going to find out what has been going on behind the scenes that has been possibly held from the people, but has also affected the people of Canada. And I think that is part of this T-square here. Now, with this moon forming a trine to Pluto, which is in Canada's 8th house, we want to remember that Pluto brings what is hidden to light. And the 8th house has to do with finances. Even banking, I look at money from overseas, the money, business, what's the word I'm looking for? The money and the finances that is kind of, that has to do between different countries. But they talk a lot about the banking in that one video, and I kind of think it's represented in this chart where there can be a lot that was hidden when it has to do with money and the banks and the corporations being exposed. Now, we also have Venus, which is the ruler of this lunar eclipse, right on top of Canada's natal south node. This is also, this can be bringing something back from the past, something that Canada has been through before, can be coming back to revisit. This can be a releasing and letting go. There could be something ending here. And that's in the 9th house of other countries, maybe Canada's relationship with other countries. So it's really interesting. And also Venus rules the 11th house and again, that fourth house of what's going on behind the scenes. Now, we do know that April 1st, I believe there's something else with carbon tax being implemented. That can also be a part of this Pluto in the 8th house because taxes is in the 8th house. And then Venus can also rule finances and things like that. So that can also be a part of this a part of this energy as well. But it's really interesting that Venus is going to be right on top of this natal south node. So there's definitely something coming back from the past. There's something that was possibly brought up before. Now we also have pretty much an exact conjunction with Jupiter and Canada's natal Pluto, which is amping up all of that energy. Now, this can be censorship because the 11th house rules people and social groups, people that come together, people that this can be protests. It can show up in that way. It can show up as people forming large groups to stand up for, a certain topic. This can also be censorship online because online is also in the 11th house because people come together online. So it's a networking. So there can be something around that also showing up as well. And in April, we actually have the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, which could be more to that energy because that's going to take place in the 11th house. And we'll get into that in a later video. Now, Canada's also going through its Mars opposition. So this is also very interesting because Mars is the ruler of the 10th house of government, authority, leadership. So there can be something, actually, this just came to me too intuitively. Both leaders of the parties could really be opposing factors at this time, like really be going at each other, like Pierre Poilievre, Justin Trudeau. They could really be going at each other at this time with this Mars opposition. That would actually be like an exact representation of this energy. Now, another thing I do want to mention is that we are going to have a Mercury retrograde in Aries from April 1st to the 25th, right here in Canada's 10th house of government, authority, leadership. So at this time, Mercury is going to be in its pre-shadow period. Whatever is kind of brought to the surface around this time, we're going to be in this energy for about a month, month and a half, meaning there can be confusion. There's going to be a lot of revisiting these themes and topics that are brought up about the government. So we really want to watch to kind of see what's surfacing. And also, too, the North Node is sitting on top of this Neptune pretty close. So that's also very interesting. Neptune is ruling this 9th house energy. So yeah, and the ruler of that Jupiter. So yeah, there can really be a lot that's being shown and exposed from the past that is completely changing the journey of Canada and the direction that Canada is moving in, especially around government because of that North Node, because the North Node represents something new, a new direction, a new journey. So whatever is being exposed at this time can be bringing in a new leader for Canada or a new direction for Canada. So it's another interesting kind of energy there that's showing up. Now, we also have the sun here forming a trine to Canada's natal Mercury, and actually even the moon is forming a sextile to Canada's natal Mercury. And Mercury is in the 2nd house of money, finances, and material possessions. So again, that can have to do with the banking and, the monies of Canada and the people and all of that. There could be some information coming out about that because Mercury can rule information, messages. So there's definitely, I think, going to be a lot of information about money laundering and just money in general around Canada and Canadian topics, if that makes sense, which is in some of those videos that I'm going to link below. So make sure you check them out. And I'm also noticing too, as I look at this chart, that we have Mars actually forming a trine to the moon. So that is also very interesting. Now, in Canada's chart, Mars is actually not the most malefic planet. However, there can be action. There could be action can be, oh my gosh, what is the term I'm looking for? There can be action taken, or oh my gosh, there can be action towards something, like a big action that's kind of standing out, like they're moving forward with something, they're taking action in a certain direction. That's what I'm trying to say. But a lot of this 9th house stuff can be, things going on overseas, foreign cultures, foreign countries, things like that. I always look to the 9th house for like what's going on with the relationship with Canada and other countries. And sometimes I looked at the 7th house when I look at like relationships between the leaders of the other countries. And Venus is actually forming a trine to Saturn here as well. And Saturn rules that seventh house of relationships. So it's going to be really interesting. I think that this full moon lunar eclipse is really going to be highlighting what's been going on behind the scenes when it has to do with money and finances. I think that is the major topics for this lunar eclipse with Canada that's really standing out. There can be more around censorship online because of that Jupiter Pluto conjunction. There can also be more protests, like maybe seeing more people speaking out, and maybe that's why they're trying to implement more censorship if there's more people speaking out online. So I think that that's really what's being activated with this full moon lunar eclipse in Canada. Now let's get into all 12 rising signs. Aries, you have this full moon lunar eclipse happening in your seventh house of relationships, one-on-one connections, business partnerships. And having the nodes transiting your first house and your seventh house is already showing you that there's a lot taking place and changing from July of 2023 to January 2025. So this year you're going through a lot of changes when it has to do with you and who you are and the direction that you want to move in. That's very fated, karmic, and destined. And also karmic relationships. Having the south node in the seventh house can bring relationships back from the past. It can also bring an understanding and clarity to those in your life that are no longer in alignment, people that you need to release and let go of because it is the south node. Now, I have seen many times with people that have the nodes transiting the north and south node transiting the seventh house, developing karmic partnerships, karmic relationships, whether it's somebody that you're connecting with in this lifetime that you were with in a past lifetime, which can definitely be a thing with this south node energy in the seventh house. Now, I want you to think back to October 14th of 2023. That's when we had the solar eclipse in Libra. So that whole month of October, what was showing up with you when it has to do with relationships, one-on-one connections, partnerships? Now those themes and topics are coming back around. So if there was a new relationship that came into your life or somebody that came back into your life, there can be a leveling up. There can be something changing that has to do with whatever was initiated back in October of 2023. This can also show up as ending karmic cycles within relationships. So maybe becoming aware, especially with that north node in the first house, maybe becoming aware of your own karmic cycles that have played out within relationships. That can definitely be a thing with this energy as well. Taurus, you have this full moon lunar eclipse happening in your sixth house of work, health, and daily routine. So those themes and topics are front and center at the time of this full moon lunar eclipse. Now think back to October 2023. Was there anything that was showing up for you around health or nutrition or your routines, maybe wanting to change your routine in some way, your routine at home, but also your routine at work? The sixth house also represents the labor and the work that you put into your career. And so think back to October of 2023, what was showing up for you? Those themes and topics are coming back around. There's more to that story coming in now with this full moon lunar eclipse. This can be a time where maybe you decide on a new health routine or changing your nutrition in some way. Maybe you're wanting to implement a new daily routine into your life with this full moon lunar eclipse in Libra. And also, too, the ruler of this lunar eclipse is Venus, which is also your chart ruler. And Venus is also currently in your 11th house, which has to do with friendships and social groups and hopes and dreams. So there may also be something going on with this Pisces area of your life, maybe wanting to develop more friendships or, get more involved within local groups or within your community in some way. Gemini, you have this full moon lunar eclipse happening in your fifth house. The fifth house represents your children, creativity, also, everything you do for fun is in that fifth house. Passion, pleasure, play, hobbies, interests, all in that fifth house. Now, think back to October 2023 when we had the solar eclipse in Libra. What was initiated or what were you moving through back in October that has to do with maybe your children or your creative pursuits. This can also be hobbies, interests, what you enjoy doing. There's more to that story showing up with this full moon lunar eclipse. This can also be, because it is the south node, it can also be a releasing and letting go of, something that has to do with those themes and topics. Maybe deciding that you're completely done with a hobby or an interest, and maybe you just don't enjoy doing it anymore, and that's changing for you. Cancer, you have this full moon lunar eclipse happening in your fourth house of home, family, property, and real estate. So this area of your life is going through a lot of changes this year, in your career houses, because you're having the eclipses in your fourth and 10th house. So the fourth house is home, family, property, real estate, and the 10th house is your career and your public reputation, what you are known for out in the world. So these areas of life are going through massive changes. Now, I have seen sometimes with the south node going through transiting the fourth house, sometimes leaving a home or moving. And this can definitely be a thing with this energy. But think back to October of 2023, what was showing up for you around home and family? That can give you an idea of how this full moon lunar eclipse is showing up for you. Leo, you have this full moon lunar eclipse happening in your third house of community, neighbors, vehicles, siblings, cousins. I said community, neighborhood. But the third house is also your mindset, communication, how you think. Right. And so there's a lot changing in this area of life. And already having the nodes transiting the third house and the ninth house, you may be thinking about publishing more because of that north node in the ninth house. Publishing is in the ninth house. Teaching is in the ninth house. So there can be a lot changing when it has to do with your mindset around these themes and topics, but just your mindset in general and how you communicate can be changing. And think back to October of 2023. What was showing up for you when it has to do with these themes and topics, because that can give you a really good idea of how this lunar eclipse is showing up for you. Virgo, you have this full moon lunar eclipse in Libra happening in your second house of money, finances, and material possessions. Also your personal values. And sometimes I also find self-worth can sometimes also reside in the second house. Now you're going through a lot this year when it has to do with your finances, because you have the nodes transiting your money houses. So think back to October of 2023. What was showing up for you around your finances? This can give you an idea of this next chapter that is showing up to the story that's playing out with these eclipses and the nodes being in Aries and Libra. This can show you what you're kind of navigating at this time. Libra, you have this full moon lunar eclipse happening in your first house. This is your lunar eclipse. So just like Aries, you are going through a lot when it has to do with you and your relationships, all of your one-on-one partnerships, all your one-on-one connections. So having the south node in the first house you can really be be aware of karmic cycles and patterns that you have had that are playing out within relationships. This is something really big that you can be navigating at this time, especially having the south node here. The south node can represent the past, but also it's an area and it brings up what we're done with. It brings up what is very karmic and faded, but that is no longer in alignment. And so you can become aware of these aspects of yourself that have been traveling, with you, and that you've carried, oh my gosh, I can't speak today, carried into relationships and all your one-on-one connections. But think back to October of 2023. What were you moving through? What was showing up for you, especially around you, your needs, wants, and desires, and your relationships? Because this can give you a really good idea of the themes and topics showing up now with this full moon lunar eclipse. Scorpio, you have this full moon lunar eclipse happening in your 12th house. Now, there's a lot going on here with the nodes transiting your 6th house and your 12th house when it has to do with possibly becoming aware of your self-sabotaging and self-undoing behaviors, patterns, karmic cycles, And there's a lot changing when it has to do with your daily routines, your health, nutrition, the work that you put in day to day. There's a lot changing in this area of life. Now, think back to October of 2023. What was showing up for you? What were the major themes and topics you were kind of navigating back during that time? That can give you a really good idea of the themes and topics that will be showing up now with this full moon lunar eclipse. Again, it's in the 12th house, so it can have to do with isolation. It can have to do with self-sabotaging, self-undoing. Sometimes when the nodes are transiting the 12th house, we want to take some time away from the world and focus more on ourselves. We have to be careful, though, that we keep it to a minimum where it's healthy isolation and not harmful isolation. That's one thing we really want to be cautious of with this energy. Sagittarius, you have this full moon lunar eclipse happening in your 11th house of friends and friendships, social groups, online connections, networking, groups and associations. It's all in that 11th house. And there's quite a lot changing here, having the nodes transit your 11th and your 5th house. You may be focusing a lot more on your creativity, your passions, and what makes you happy, and not so much those around you. And I also find too, as long as when we have the nodes transiting this area of our life, we can be making new friendships. We can be releasing friendships that are no longer in alignment with us. But as long as you're focusing on what makes you happy and what you're passionate about, you can bring those people and draw those people in that are in alignment with you. So think back to October of 2023. What was showing up for you, especially around friendships, groups, associations online? That can give you an idea of the major themes and topics showing up now with this full moon lunar eclipse. Capricorn, you have this full moon lunar eclipse happening in your 10th house of career and public reputation. So your career and your home and family house are going through a lot of changes here. You have the North Node transiting your 4th house of home, family, property, and real estate, and the South Node transiting your 10th house of career, public reputation, what you are known for out in the world. Think back to October 2023. What was showing up for you around these themes and topics? That can give you an idea of what will be showing up now that you are going to either have to address, possibly release and let go of, change in some way, especially when it has to do with your career, the direction you want to take with your career, and also how you are known kind of out in the world, what your public image is. Aquarius, you have this full moon lunar eclipse happening in your 9th house of higher education, higher knowledge, long distance travel, philosophy, religion. So there's a lot changing here, having the nodes transit your 3rd house and your 9th house. So the 3rd house has to do with your mindset, communication, also your community, neighbors, local travel, vehicles, siblings, cousins. There's quite a lot here in the 3rd house, and having the North Node transiting your 3rd house, there could be a shift in mindset taking place. But with the South Node in the 9th, there can also be a lot changing when it has to do with your belief systems, because your belief systems kind of reside in that 9th house, also your philosophical views. And so these areas of life are going through a lot of changes. But think back to October 2023. What were the major themes and topics showing up for you? That can give you an idea of what is showing up at this time with this full moon lunar eclipse. Pisces, you have this full moon lunar eclipse happening in your 8th house of your partner's finances, money coming in from outside resources, taxes, inheritance. Also, psychological healing and transformation is in the 8th house. So there's quite a lot going on with your money and money houses this year, having the nodes transiting your money houses. Now, the South Node can represent a releasing, a letting go, or something coming back from the past. So sometimes this doesn't even have to do with you. Maybe there's just a lot going on with your partner's finances. But think back to October 2023. What was showing up for you? What were you moving through? That can give you an idea of how this full moon lunar eclipse is, what this full moon lunar eclipse is going to bring up for you now. Now, there can be a lot going on psychologically because it is the 8th house. So with that South Node, there can be a lot kind of surfacing from the past that maybe you've had to address or move through psychologically, that you're finally realizing you're done with, you're over over it. You're ready to release, let it go, and move on.